Greetings, YouTube. Today I'll be talking about Carl Sagan's book, The Dragons of Eden, Speculations on the Evolution of Human Intelligence. Now, the first thing that struck me about this book is the cover. Now, the cover depicts hominids, but in this scene, in the background, are theropod dinosaurs, and then there's this herbivore here. Now, this creature in the back, let me move my finger down, right there, that right there is a megafauna mammal, which was probably contemporary to humans, and at least hominids of that particular size, though I don't know if they existed in the same continent at the same time. And there's no evidence that hominids and dinosaurs ever existed at the same time. Dinosaurs died out. At least they began dying out at 65 million years ago. How long it took them to die out is a bit of speculation. Some people say they died out pretty much instantaneously, and some it took quite a while. You know, a couple of million years. But they were gone long before mammals had evolved to the point of producing hominids. And I was a little concerned from the tone of the book when it started, was that this may be a situation of engineer's disease. And engineer's disease is something that it can affect particularly skilled engineers who have an expertise in a field. Because after a certain point in their career, sometimes, and I've seen this only in men, I don't know if it's something that also occurs amongst feminine engineers, is that they come to believe that because they are an expert in a field, they are an expert in all fields, which is not true. I believe Neil deGrasse Tyson has been guilty of this quite recently. But I like Carl Sagan. I remember reading some of his books earlier, years ago, like 30 years ago. So I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a go. And his writing style is good. And one thing I do note, that he does not cut the reader any slack. This book is challenging in its use of terminology, and it's that it assumes that the reader has a fairly solid base knowledge of science, and particularly in biology. I once heard someone say that if you want to write a book and have it be, or an article and have it be approachable to Americans, you have to write it as though you're aiming at a fourth grader. And this is most definitely being aimed at like college freshmen, maybe even a little more advanced than that. So be aware of that. This may not be all that approachable to some people who don't have some kind of background in that. But if you have some interest in evolutionary theory, you probably have the base knowledge. So go for it. And I have a real hard time imagining that someone doesn't have some information about evolution if you're going to be approaching this. Never been introduced to evolution? Read Charles Darwin's The Origin of the Species. I would recommend the Barnes & Noble reproduction of the first edition. It's excellent. So the book is big, and it covers a lot of ground. And his basic premise here is that we don't know where human intelligence comes from, so he's going to examine us as animals from the ground up. So there is some evolution, just talking about evolution in itself, and then he begins to discuss the evolution of our brain, from the reptilian complex at the base of our brain, and then the limbic systems, and then of course the neocortex, which is where we are, humans are, and the different ways they function, how the right side and the left side of your brains have different jobs most of the time, even though there is some overlap, and if there is a damage in one section of your brain, a lot of the time other sections of your brain will take over. Not always. And specific pieces of brain tissue can be harmed by tumor or accident, things like that, that cause radical changes in a person's behavior or health or cognitive ability. And he covers all of this. And unfortunately, a lot of the research in this is done on animals, particularly monkeys and chimps. So if you are an animal rights activist, you may find some of this difficult to read. I am very much for as little harm being done as possible to anything in life if we can. So some of this was a little squicky at times, but this is where the research was done, and realized this was written in 1977. There was a lot less concern for animal welfare in that time in many places than there is now. We're a long way from 1977, and it's important to remember that. Also, it was interesting to me that just because I am 40 years beyond that, I have more base knowledge about some of these topics than does Carl Sagan, and that was a little weird. And I don't mean I didn't do this, just because we have accumulated more scientific knowledge and I've just absorbed some of it. I'm not saying I'm a better researcher than Carl Sagan, because I'm not. But it was a little cognitive dissonance there for me, like, oh crap, I know something, I know about this more than Carl Sagan does. Because in some ways Carl Sagan is like this pinnacle of genius. But over the course of the book, I came to realize that he actually got knocked down a few pegs. Because while he and I agree on certain things, I think that some of his own personal bias kind of got in his own way. And I think in some ways I was seeing, I almost want to say, the ossification of a researcher's mind. Like he became set in some of his beliefs in a manner that wasn't necessarily conductive to the completion of this book. But it was interesting. And also it was very humorous when he was discussing, for example, how marijuana use from a third person, talking about how other people's marijuana experiences have been reported to have done X, Y, and Z, when we know Carl Sagan was a major head. That was kind of funny. But it was interesting. And from a historical perspective, I think it was important for me to have read it. I would like to read something newer, something 21st century on this topic, evolution of human intelligence, and I don't know what to read. So if anybody out there has any recommendations, I would greatly appreciate it. I have a friend of mine who I'm going to contact, who actually is involved in evolutionary psychology, so maybe she can help me. So with caveats, I can recommend this. It's an older book. It's not going to be discussing new concepts in many ways. But he did get me thinking about evolution of human intelligence in a way that other books have not. So in that manner, the book was a success. And when a book can get you thinking about a subject in a new way, or thinking about a subject that you've never thought about before, that's important. So, you know, I think you might be better served finding a more contemporary book on this topic, some more more recent research. I know I'm going to see if I can find one. But I did enjoy it, and I will be passing this on because I think it could do good to others. But yeah, it's getting a little creaky. It's from '77. It's showing its age. But you know, funny books do that.